Thanks, everybody. We have a full room again. It's excellent. Excellent to get the turnout. So this is the second lecture for the DHPC Pilot rating exam. And this one is about flight theory. What you have on the screen is just a rough bullet list of the kind of things that you need to know in order to pass the flight theory exam. And we're going to go through all of these tonight. So the atmosphere, the thing we fly through. The important thing to know about the atmosphere is it's a great big body of air, and air, like anything, it's compressible. So there's a lot more at the bottom than there is at the top. Okay, and it's divided into some sections. So the bit that we live in is called the troposphere, and although it's not 80% of the height of the atmosphere, it holds about 80% of the air in the atmosphere because it basically just sort of squeezes down. To give you a rough idea, and I'll just put some rough numbers on, it's about 10 kilometers high. It's a little bit higher than Mount Everest, troposphere. And then you have the boundary layer, which is what we fly in, which is an area of this towards the bottom. And that's where most of our weather is as well. So above that, you got stratosphere, shooting stars and mesosphere. You've got the space station way up in the thermosphere, and above that, we're on the edge of space. Okay, so we're walking around here on the ground. So there's quite a lot of air above us. Now, if you were to weigh it, so if you took a column of air that wide and weighed it going right up, it would be, oops, sorry. This is to give you a rough idea. This is the pressure gradient. So pressure, if you think of pressure as being this axis here, it's quite high down low. And then it moves up in a sort of reverse logarithmic line. So it's quite, the thing to notice here is it's quite consistent within the troposphere, especially in the area that we fly. And that's relevant for working out things like your DL, your dry adiabatic lapse rate and stuff like that. And things so like
troposphere, 80% of air, is that by weight?
Yes, and by volume as well. Or not, no, by weight, yeah, by weight. By molecule count. So if you notice that there's quite a linear line here in your pressure gradient, which means we can make calculations based on pressure. Yeah. And that's why our altimeters and variometers and everything work on pressure, because it's quite linear. So we can say if the pressure drops X number of pascals or megapascals or milli, whatever, we have gone up or down X number of meters. It gets a little bit trickier when you get high because, as you can see, it's not consistent. So it's not as easy to use the pressure to decide what height you're at. Your calculations get a little bit trickier.
Your altimeter won't be so accurate if you go above Everest.
Yeah, so jet airplanes and stuff need to use more complex calculations. But for instance, for us, we have a simple enough one, which is what, 30 feet per Pascal.
Millipascal.
And that's pretty much up to as high as where we're going to fly.
Yes.
You know, you can just assume that it's a nice linear decrease in pressure. So, and that's great for us. That's really handy for us because we don't have to be mathematicians to work out things like how high we are based on pressure. Inshallah. So, how about the weight? So there's roughly a ton of air sitting on your shoulders. So you're carrying a ton. And when you move around, you're carrying a ton of air on your shoulders. Pretty strong.
Yes.
So how come we don't get crushed?
It's spread all around us.
It is. Plus, you have to keep in mind your body is mostly water. And water is really good at just resisting that pressure. So although it is spread all around you, it's still squeezing into you from all around. It's not like just because it's squeezing in here and squeezing in here, your body goes, well, that's fine. It isn't. Your body is squeezing back at the same pressure because it's made of water. And then the things like your air cavities, so your nostrils, your lungs and stuff, well, they don't get crushed because you're generally breathing air at the point that you're actually standing on the ground. It becomes a problem for, we'd say, a diver. If you, we'd say a free diver, somebody who takes a breath of air on the surface and then dives down as deep as you can go. Well, they're obviously breathing air at the surface at, the surface pressure. Now, when they go down into water, the pressure of the water increases dramatically faster than just the air. So if they go down 10 meters, they're already at 1 bar more than the pressure that was on the surface. Every 10 meters of water is 1 bar. So a really good freehold diver, free breath diver, if they go down, say 30, 40, 50 meters, their lungs are like 2 little wallets. Not that small, but they get completely compressed because the air inside their lungs is not at the same pressure as the water that's outside. And it actually gets squeezed. And it becomes a limit to how far you can dive, deep dive on holding your breath, because you'll actually do yourself damage. Similarly, your nostrils, your eardrums, all of those. It doesn't happen to scuba divers, because scuba divers breathe air at the same pressure as the water around them. But there's an inverse problem with a scuba diver. A scuba diver goes down 30 meters, and takes a big breath of air out of their tank and holds their breath. And then they decide to wander up to the surface. The air in their lungs will expand 3 times its volume and burst their lungs. You need to be really careful with scuba diving that you don't hold your breath as you're ascending, because the air will basically, because it's the air you breathe it is at 30 meters of water, which is a 3 bar. And if you slowly go up into the surface, suddenly you're at 1 bar, and the air will just expand like this, and your lungs don't get that big. So they will actually burst out of your chest. So
in the water, you're talking about pressure in bars, and in the atmosphere, you're talking about pressure in
millibars. And the reason is because pressure drops a lot slower.
So 1,000 millibars to
a bar. Yeah. So 10 meters of water is 1 bar.
Yes.
Whereas what 3,000 feet is 1 bar.
Yes.
Can I interject with an amazing but macabre fact?
Yeah.
What I learned yesterday, maybe today. Wind turbines kill birds by impact. Wind turbines kill bats by exploding their lungs. Because the bats know that the wind turbine is there in the dark. They can echolocate it. They miss it. They go into the air that the turbine leaves behind.
Oh, wow.
This low pressure zone.
Yeah.
With turbulence from the blade having passed by.
And the pressure in their lungs is.
That overpressures their lungs.
Wow.
And they.
Just like a scuba diver holding their breath then.
Just like that.
Wow. That's nuts. That is nuts.
Or that. There you go.
So that's the atmosphere. The thing to keep in mind is we live right down here and we fly in quite a low layer. In the UK, you're talking about 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 feet, not 10,000 meters. So we're only flying, the bit we fly is the boundary layer, which is just down here, way down here. Right, so Bernoulli's theorem. Who knows? Clive, you were at the lecture last year. You know Bernoulli's theorem. So Bernoulli's theorem says that as you squeeze air through a constriction, or as you push a fluid, and air is a fluid, through a narrowing, the air speeds up, the fluid speeds up, and the pressure within that area drops. So what you'll find is if you put a pressure gauge here and some kind of speed gauge, you'll find that the air, if this is air, you're pushing through here, the air is moving faster here than here, but the pressure is less in here. Higher pressure here, there's lower pressure here. Now, you want to, that has a number of practical applications for us when we fly. And one of them would be, if you're flying a hill here, and there's this gap, let's say you're flying this front of the hill, the wind's coming on the hill, you're flying along here, and there's a gap, and you're flying again. Well, if you can notice the gap, generally there'll be a restriction. So what's going to happen? The wind is going to speed up as it goes through the gap. Yes. So if you're not careful and you wander along here, and you wander in here, you might find that all of a sudden you're pinned and you're pushed through the gap, and you get all the turbulence and back and everything. So that's Bernoulli's theorem in practice. So that's why if you were flying a hill like this and it was quite strong wind, you tend to fly here, and then you might do nice little semicircular to keep yourself on the run and not be pushed back into the construction. So there's another place that that happens for us. For instance, here, you're flying a hill. Here's a hill. You take off here, nice wind, and you find that you go up to the top and all of a sudden you've been pushed over the back. That's Bernoulli again. And it becomes even more pronounced if you have an inversion that's sitting on the top there. Because the inversion is like another wall, and it squeezes the air, or even a cloud, even a heavy cloud over the hill will also create a sort of a layer that squeezes the wind. So that's Bernoulli in action. So Bernoulli's theorem, increase in airflow causes a decrease in pressure. So aspect ratio, I guess everybody knows what aspect ratio is. It's the ratio of the length of the cord to the length of the span of your wing.
The span divided by the curve.
Yep. Yep. So let me see, aspect ratios of most, you'd say mid-Bs and stuff are between 5 to 5.5, which are saying that the span is roughly 5.5 times longer than the cord.
This is in what wing?
Generally, most of the, we'd say mid-Bs will be over, maybe around 5, maybe up to 5.5. Some of the high Bs are around 5.5, some of them are getting up over 6 now. And then as you go up into the Cs and the Ds and into the competition wings and the Xenos, they're going up to 7. There's nothing up at 8, is there?
Experimental, yeah. So we've had things like the baby HP.
Oh, right, but not proper like successful. We're all up at high 7s.
You can really use. So
Yeah.
Enzos and boomers.
They're in the 7s.
They're in the high 7s.
And the reason that you find more performant wings or higher aspect is because it has a benefit to drag. A wider wing with a shorter cord has less drag, naturally has less drag. It reduces the amount of mostly induced drag. So it's more performant, yes, but it's a bigger handful. Any questions on aspect ratio? So for instance, these would be maybe 5-to-1 aspect ratio would be maybe a low B. And then you get into 7-to-1, you're getting into Ds and competitions. And literally they have similar shape, it's just that they're more stretched. Less depth in them. Well, they are because they're wider, right? But with the modern high aspect ratio wings, which especially these two liners and with all the lines and stuff, the one I flew anyhow, and I flew it on a nice day, it felt really solid, really solid. And I think they are more solid. And we'll say some of the lower aspect ratio wings, but when they go big, but they don't collapse as quickly, especially with that was my experience of it, which is,
yeah, I agree.
It was deceptive. I was going, wow, this is amazing. It turned into sixpence. It felt really solid, really pressurized. Like this thing will never go. It felt solid.
It does feel like you're on rails.
Yeah.
As a flyer though, which is preferable if you've got a wing that is a bit more prone to collapse, as opposed to one that will not collapse, but then when it collapses, it's a that's
going to be personal preference.
Really big.
That's so, a personal thing.
Yes.
You decide there's so many variables that you have to kind of balance, and it's your compromise. Where do you want to sit in the whole area space of wing variables, aspect ratio versus et cetera. So there isn't any right answer or wrong answer.
Collapsing has always been had a good side to it, in that it is damping pitch energy. So as your glider's pitching, if it's starting to collapse and that's coming back, Okay, so you're getting more drag with that collapse. That pitch energy, that shoot is damped. So in having a glider that's able to collapse, particularly when we're a pendulum under it, that's actually
a good thing.
Yeah, it's a design feature.
It is, yeah, it is. It seems odd, but it is. It bleeds excess energy that if it didn't collapse, it'd probably break or it'll invert. You know, a rigid wing like hang gliders, they break sometimes, or you end up upside down. Very hard to end up upside down in a paraglider because it'll have collapsed long before that generally, and then popped out again. So yeah, the fact that paragliders collapse is not a bad thing. It's that we don't know how to deal with the collapse becomes the bad thing, but not that they collapse. It's actually they're designed to collapse. It's designed into the glider. Okay, so are we okay with high aspect ratio? It's pretty straightforward, really. Okay, so let's talk about, and this is the one, mechanics of it. Why does paragliding aspect ratio?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
When he says got less drag, is that induced or parasitic drag?
Induced.
Because
Now, they'll also, especially two liners, they'll have less parasitic drag because they're less line,
less form.
you know?
Yeah.
And they're highly optimized. But
What's the wing on the tips of that?
the advantage of this shape being wider is there's less induced drag, and the induced drag is a smaller part of the drag that's been created by the wing because the wing is wider, so it has less of an impact. It's less significant, whereas this induced drag is huge. It's smaller wing, and it also plays a more significant role in Europe. Gliders have very wide wings. So the wider the wing, the fact is it has less induced drag. That is just aerodynamics, you know. And that's why more performant wings are usually higher aspect. Well, they always are higher aspect. So mechanics of lift. Why does an aerofoil shape fly? In this particular shape, the reason it flies is as you go through the air, this shape causes the air to split. Part of the air flows over the wing, and part of the air flows under the wing. And for reasons that I've never really understood, the air that starts going over this wing, you can see it has further to travel over this wing to get from here to the end where it wants to meet up with its mates again that went underneath the wing. This air here actually travels less. There's a little bit more distance for it to travel there. And for some reason, it speeds up. It's like, I want to get to the end with my mates. So I want to meet my friend here at the end. So I'm going to go faster over the top. Now, what did Bernoulli's law say about when a fluid speeds up?
Lower
Pressure drops. So what you have is you have the air over the top of the wing, which is recorded fact. It does speed up. Because it speeds up, there's less pressure at the top. So, and the air that's flowing under the wing, as you can see, there was this body of air here, and it's kind of squeezed down into a narrower section here. And that causes, just here at the front, it causes an increase in pressure. It doesn't speed up because it doesn't generally have to go much faster. It's got less distance to travel. But there is an increase of pressure underneath and a decrease in pressure on top. So what's happened? Your airfoil is just going to move up. You know? And strangely enough, you get more lift from the top than the bottom. Intuitively, you'd think that the lift is coming from the bottom. It's the air pushing the wing underneath. It's not. It's actually the fact that there's a lower pressure on the top that it's sucking the wind up in a sense. So that's roughly 1/3 from below and 2/3 from above. Need to know that in the exam, you'll probably be asked that. Any questions on that? That's how lift is created. Magic. Magic. So let's talk about the forces that are at play when you're flying. So there's 3 main forces. There's lift, drag, and gravity. So if you think of us flying through the air, generally when a wing is flying through the air, it's not flying level, it's actually flying, it's always sinking through the air. We're gliders. The gliders are always sinking through the air. If you're good, you'll find a block of air that's rising faster and sinking. So you'll actually have a net gain and you'll be going up, but you're always sinking through the air. So you're always traveling in a slight direction down through the air. And you can think of your lift as being at 90 degrees to the angle of your direction of travel. So that's the lift that your wing is generating that we just talked about, roughly at 90 degrees. Your drag is what's pulling you back, and we talk about what's causing drag, but anything moving through the air creates drag. And depending on its shape and the material it's made out of and other factors, that drag may be more or less. And it's one of the big design factors that people who design paragliders and stuff, they're always trying to reduce drag. So drag is always working against your direction of travel. It's pulling you back. It's holding you back. That's why it's called drag. If it was working in your direction of travel, it wouldn't be called drag. It'd be called thrust. So drag. And then the last one obviously is gravity, which is always straight down to the center of the earth. So those are the three forces that work on a paraglider. Now a paramotor would have one extra force, which is thrust, which is in the direction of travel, generally, unless you're an idiot and you turn sideways or something. But generally, thrust is in the direction of travel. So the way it works is you have this resultant, when you add your lift and your drag vectors together, the way you add a vector together is you just complete the square. So you go up here, across there, down here, and then that's the diagonal, and that's your resultant. That's your vector. So that is what you're getting. You get so much lift and you have so much drag, and what you end up getting is this force here, which is opposite to gravity. Now it's generally never the same as gravity. In fact, it never is the same as gravity because we're all the time sinking. It's always a little less. Because we can't generate enough of lift without an engine to be able to actually counteract gravity. We're always sinking. So our resultant is always less than gravity. The only reason we go up is because we find a body of air that's going up faster than we're sinking. Right? So we're kind of piggybacking on another force, which is the force of that whole mass of air that's going up. But from the point of view of just the glider, it's always sinking. So those are the three forces. The three forces on a paraglider is lift, drag, and gravity, or your weight. And they are always working together in some sort of relationship. If you were flying level in still air, neither accelerating nor decelerating, your resultant and your gravity are exactly the same. Right? But as we know, if a paraglider is flying in still air, it is never flying level. It's always sinking off at its right angle. So the glide ratio, or the lift to drag ratio, which is something you might be asked for, the lift to drag ratio is the ratio between lift and drag. And the glide angle is the ratio of how much forward, we say meters, you cover for how much vertical loss, or gain, which is general loss. And they're the same, they work out the same. The relationship between your lift and your drag is the same as the relationship with how much forward direction of travel you're going and how much vertical loss you have in that.
Synchrony.
Yeah, your synchrony. So LD ratio is the same as your glide ratio. They work out the same.
Yes. Are there figures to them?
Yeah. Different wings will have different glide ratio. So my wing, I guess, is about a 9 in still air. The really good wings, the competition wings, would be up at quite 11 now, Pete. Would it be even more? 11 to 1?
Yes.
A's will probably be an 8. A parachutist wing would probably be about a 3. 3 to 1. So they don't they drop a lot for certain distance. And what you generally want is you want a higher glide ratio, or you want a higher lift to drag ratio, because that means you can travel further before you land. And there's some exercises later on in showing the difference between the higher and the lower glide ratios and show how it works. Are there any questions about that? Nope. Center of pressure. You will be asked about that. What is the center of pressure? You just need to learn the you won't have to write it down. So if you're asked what is the center of pressure, generally what it means, what it is they give you 3 or 4 answers and you have to pick the right one. So just remember that it's a point, it's a virtual point or a magical point where you can think of all the forces acting. Now, obviously, all the forces aren't acting through things. They're acting all over the place on the wing. But you can conceptually think of them as acting through a single point.
Yes.
And that's the center of pressure.
Yes. I think the word is something like the resultant of all the lift forces.
Well, I'm sure there's lots of different definitions. You just have to learn it. You just have to learn it. Right. Right. So, angle of attack. So again, direction of travel is, well, opposite direction of airflow. So if you're traveling through the air, you're generally always thinking the air is then the direction is coming into your face. And
that's that'll be 1 in 8 then. For normally as a paraglider.
B would be 1 in 8. Higher B might be 1 in 9.
Yes.
Or you usually the big number first, 9 to 1.
Yes.
And then as you get into the C's and the D's, you're going to be going 10 and 11 to 1.
Yes.
They just have better performance.
It's the same thing as the other.
So the angle of attack is if you take your wing, you take your direction of airflow, or which is basically opposite direction of your travel. You take your chord line, which is you have to draw a line from the very tip to the back of your paraglider right through the very center. It's the angle it makes there is your angle of attack. Now, as you pull the brakes, your angle of attack goes up. And as you put on speed bar, generally your angle of attack decreases. So that's where angle of attack is relevant. It's how you control the glider effectively is your angle of attack. You know, if you pull both brakes, the whole glider increases in angle of attack. If you pull one brake, one side, the angle of attack increases. That causes it to have more drag, it slows down, and the other part of the glider turns. So you actually turn into that direction. So angle of attack is how you control your brake.
That's probably even more true for the 2 liners with the toggles where you're directly controlling that angle of attack with the for everybody else, we're on brakes.
All right.
So you're pulling the back of the wing down, which is one form of drag. But in pulling the back of the wing down, you're then levering it up at the front as well.
Any questions? Does it make sense, or am I going too fast? Makes sense. Okay.
Which is why I'll be going to rear riser steering on my next glider.
What's your next glider going to be?
I don't know, but I tell you what, I'm waiting to fly Chris Fountain's new
the flow
2.5 liner flow fusion.
See, they have a 2.5 liner Rush 6 now.
Really?
The Rush 6 is the 2.5 liner of the Delta. So I'll wait till Stephen comes back. This is to give an idea of angle of attack and the airflow over an aerofoil as you increase or decrease your angle of attack.
Honestly, when you see this air, it's a wonder the things work.
It is, yeah. It's kind of scary when you see it now. I don't know how relevant this is. This is an actual rigid airfoil. It's in a wind tunnel with smoke. But you know, it's similar shape to our airfoils. So this set of slides here, Stephen, is to show you the air flowing over an aerofoil. And as you increase the angle of attack, what happens to that air?
It becomes disturbed, more turbulent.
Yeah, so the air is obviously the red bit.
Yeah.
So as we increase our angle of attack, you can see it starts to get a little bit more turbulent here. A little bit more, and all of a sudden it has detached.
Yes.
And you're at your stall point. So this is what happens if you pull too much brakes and just hold them on. You get to this point here. So this is what they call detachment. Here at the very beginning, where you're flying along very nicely, there's a lovely streamlined flow of air across your wing, and all the forces, the lifting forces are working the way they're supposed to, and everybody's happy and we're gliding around and everything's good. But then what you get, if you increase the angle of attack too much, air wants to stick together. It has a kind of viscosity. It wants to stay together and it wants to hang on to your wing. It wants to kind of hug your wing. But if you push it too much and push your angle of attack, it just can't. And it breaks away from your wing. Once it breaks away from the wing, you don't have that lift anymore at the front. You don't have that nice increase or decrease in pressure in the front. And your wing stops flying. And that's what happens here when you get up to the very top. You get to your stall point. And at your stall point, you just hit this detachment of air here. So as you can see, it's not rushing around here and trying to meet its mates at the back and going faster and generating a nice area of low pressure above the wing. It's just going, can be bothered with all of this. And it's just floating around here and creating all sorts of turbulence, and this just totally interferes with any lift potential of that airplane. And it's not flying anymore. You get to this point, it's not. It's stalled. And
just go one back.
Yeah.
Or maybe two back. Yeah. So you can see where you get that change in the feeling in your glider. In that, as your back end of the wing has already got that detachment of flow, you've got that mushiness. And you could be putting more left and more right in, and it's doing nothing. So there's nothing to act against.
So one of the exercises you do if you do a SIV, it's finding the stall point. Now what you'll do is you'll slow the wing down and slow the wing down, and the idea is that you learn the feeling of your wing as it approaches the stall point, so that if it does happen in the wild, you get off the brakes and you let it fly. And what Peter's saying is, as you can see here, as you're approaching the stall point, you get a lot of turbulence back here. There's no laminar flow back here, and this bit of the wing here is just going to be fluttering about. It'll have, even if you pull brakes, it's not going to do anything. It's got nothing to act against. So you feel it as you approach the stall point. You feel the back of your wings starting very mushy and very light and fluttery. And even if you start doing something with your brakes, it's not going to do anything. So that's one of the things you do with a SIV, is the search for stall. And the idea is to recognize the signs before you get there. Rather than, now the other thing you do in a SIV is you learn what to do if you actually stall your wing and how to get it back flying again. But you're much better to recognize the signs before you stall it rather than recover from a stall, if you can help it. So these are the characteristics of stall. High angle of attack. That causes, and the reason that high angle of attack causes stall, it causes the separation of air, which just then creates this huge, massive turbulence behind your wing. There's no lift at all on the top of your wing, none at all. You have a lot of drag because now you got this quite big profile pushing through the air. So you got a lot more drag, no lift on top. It's all just working against you at the stage. Lots of lift, and your center of pressure, which we'll talk about in a second. Your center of pressure usually sits here, your center of pressure to move way forward here, which means that your airfoil is actually being pushed further over. So you got to the point where not only have you stalled, but the wing wants you to stall naturally. It doesn't want to come back. And we'll talk about that when we get to stability. Any questions on angle of attack?
Is there a point where, although the wing is stalled, but it will parachute down?
Yeah, if you're really good and an acro pilot, you probably can keep it at that point, just at the right point. It would be a sweet spot, I guess. I wouldn't be able to do it. It's something I'd like to learn to do, but I don't have the sensitivity to do it. But it is it's an acro move. Mm-hmm. Yes. A way you could simulate that is go out someday ground handling, turn your wing upside down, and try to control it on the brakes. You'll find it's a lot harder than controlling it when it's right set up on the right. A lot harder because they're not designed to control the wing in that way. So, but that's what you're doing when you go into deep stall. You're controlling it on the brakes. So let's talk about stability and the concept of stability. Well, obviously, if we're talking about, is this little green pea, is it in a stable scenario there? Well, it is. And the reason is, if you move it, it'll tend to come back to the point you want it to be at. So, how would you put it? It comes back to the configuration you want it to be in. That's pretty stable. But even that stable configuration has a limit. I mean, if you push this pea up over the top here, it'll fall off the side here and it's not stable anymore. But for the most part, it's quite stable. You can push it to the left and the right, and it'll eventually work its way back into the center. So that's a very stable configuration. Now, that's obviously a very unstable configuration. The slightest move of that P, and it'll just keep going. It won't come back to the center. So that's unstable. And then you have something like this, which is quite neutral. I could move the P to there, and it just doesn't come back, but doesn't go any further. And similarly, I can move it here. So that's neutral. So let's talk about paragliders and the concept of stability of paragliders. So is an aerofoil shape stable or unstable? Is it naturally stable or naturally unstable? In other words, if it kind of gets out of shape, does it want to get back into shape naturally? Or does it want to even get into more trouble? You think an aerofoil shape is stable? Okay, we're just taking the aerofoil shape.
Oh, okay, right. Oh.
No, sorry.
Right, okay.
So there are 2 points in an aerofoil that you can think of. You can
Last year.
I think you got it right. Actually. So you get the point of gravity, which you can think of gravity obviously is acting through the whole area, but you can think of there is a particular point in this aerofoil where the gravity is acting through. A bit like the point of pressure. And gravity is always working downwards. And then you have the point of pressure. So it's an aerofoil, it's got lift. So the pressure generally, the point of pressure is generally, the net pressure is generally going upwards. Because it's an aerofoil. And generally they're in balance. They're kind of around about the same point in the aerofoil. So as you can see, what's happening here is gravity is trying to pull it down through this point, and the center of pressure is trying to push it up. And they're kind of on the same point. So at that point there, you could say that aerofoil is quite stable. It's happy enough. But what happens if you increase the angle of attack slightly? See what happens when you increase the angle of attack on an aerofoil. The center of gravity stays the same, more or less, but the center of pressure moves forward. So now, what happens now? You've got an aerofoil there. You've got gravity trying to hold it down, but you've got pressure as it moves forward a bit, and it's trying to push it up. That wing is now going to want to keep going up, because it's out of balance. You got the force that wants to move it up is higher than the fulcrum on the gravity, so it's going to actually want to keep pushing it up. And it just gets worse as you increase your angle of attack. So an aerofoil shape is inherently unstable. In other words, if you knock it out of your desired configuration, it won't naturally come back. And yet that's what we fly. We fly aerofoils. And we can prove from experience that they are quite stable and that, it rocks all around the sky, but it always seems to come back. Where it's above my head and I'm sitting under it and it's, it's where you want to be. So definitely paragliders seem to be inherently stable, and yet the aerofoil above our heads is inherently unstable. And why is that?
Well, because it's pendulum.
Exactly. So you got 3 axes to talk about stability. So if you think of this as a paraglider, this is the front of the paraglider here. This is looking head on to a paraglider, so these are both sides, and this is looking down on top of the paraglider. So you have 3 axes of movement. You've got pitch, which is a paraglider moving like this. You got a roll when it's going sideways, and yaw when it's kind of going like this. And paragliders are designed to be stable in these 3 axes, more or less, depending. I mean, there's a whole compromise of characteristics, and you will find that as you go up through the more performant wings, you will make compromises in some areas. So they may be less stable in some areas in order to gain more performance. But generally, the main ingredient in creating the stability, you were right, is the pendulum effect. Because what you have is think of a paraglider with 5 kilos plus 2-3 kilos of line. And 90 kilos of a big fat lad underneath it. Most of the weight in your aircraft is sitting way down here, a couple of meters below the airfoil. You know, it's a significant amount of weight. So you got this pendulum effect, and it forces the airfoil back to the configuration you want to be in, which is sitting above your head. So to give you an idea, if we say take the pitch, if we pitch way back, right, what will happen is the wing pitches back. I keep flying forward, but now my weight is just going to go swinging right back underneath the wing. So I catch up with the wing, even though in this configuration here, the wing wants to keep going up and up.
Yes.
It just does. The airfoil itself doesn't want to come back.
Yes.
But it's constrained by these lines.
Yeah.
And as this, 90 kilos or 100 kilos or whatever we are, starts to swing back,
Yeah.
it brings it back,
Yes.
right? It forces it back into the shape we want to be in.
Yes.
So the pendulum effect is what keeps a paraglider
Yes.
stable above our heads.
Yes.
It's not the airfoil. The airfoil is working against us, and so that's the pendulum effect on pitch. So very similar on roll. So for instance, you're flying along, one half of your paraglider goes into quite a strong thermal and it's pitched up like that. And this wing pitches down. Again, the whole wing wants to keep going. But these lines don't allow it. And your weight, eventually you'll roll up and eventually you'll start coming back down underneath it again. And you pull the wing back into the shape. So again, pendulum. Now the yaw is different. Yaw is to do with the shape and the washout, or the sweep back. So I'll explain that. So this is looking down on a paraglider, and we're looking at the stability. If I've got a paraglider like this, and it doesn't generally turn like this so much, you'd be more familiar with the roll and the pitches, but generally, especially the lower aspect ratio gliders don't give you a sense of this. The bigger, wider ones will do all sorts of funny.
It's when both wingtips start going forward and they bend forward and back like that.
But it's not you don't notice the yaw as much in a paraglider. Well, it does yaw. So is a paraglider yaw stick? In other words, if it goes off your configuration, does it naturally want to come back or does it naturally want to keep turning? So it's yaw stick. And the reason is it's what they call sweep back. So if you notice with a paraglider, this is the leading edge here. It's kind of swept back here. And it's swept back here. It's not a straight line right across there. And there's a reason for that. Number of reasons, but one of them is it improves your yaw stability. So what happens is if the paraglider turns like that, keep in mind we're moving in that direction. So the airflow is coming like this. And for some reason, I'm flying through the air, and for some reason my paraglider goes like that. We present a bigger part of the wing to the airflow here than here. And this creates more drag. This part of the wing now creates more drag. And what it does is it forces that side of the wing back. There's less drag on this side of the wing than there is in here when it yaws. Now, the understanding is that the airflow is coming straight.
Yes.
Right? So that's why this is called sweep back. The sweep back shape gives you yaw stability.
Yes.
Is that clear?
Yes.
Right.
Good.
Okay.
So have you flown any other kind of aircraft? Like a hang glider?
Oh, a hang glider, actually, but I would say it's just on the little, just lessons,
Because that's
1
the-
minute tops,
Yeah.
and a minute flights.
The one big difference with a paraglider is that you take your hands off and it just rights itself.
Yes.
Not many other aircraft do that.
Yes.
If you're on a joystick aircraft, it might come back from a roll, but it's going to take a long time to do it. You actually check it back from a roll, and you do the same with hang glider as well.
Now, one of the
So
reasons.
if you're unconscious on a paraglider, you'd be in there.
You're in a better position.
Oh, much better position. Yeah. If you're
unconscious on a paraglider.
Yeah, much better position. Yeah. And the main reason is paragliders in aircraft, there are very few aircraft where the aircraft itself is 95% the weight of the aircraft is sitting way below.
Yes.
With a very strong center of gravity.
Balloon again and helium.
For instance, but even a helium balloon, the weight of a helium balloon is in the balloon.
Yeah.
You know, even if there's 3 or 4 guys sitting in the basket, I guarantee the basket and the guys sitting in the basket are not as much as the weight of the material of the balloon. It's still a high center of gravity.
Yeah.
Whereas a paraglider, as an aircraft, has a unique configuration where it's got an extremely low center of gravity. And therefore it will naturally, that's such a huge impact. Whereas take a hang glider. Hang glider is a little bit heavier than a paraglider. And most of the weight of a hang glider is the person that's flying it generally. But they're an awful lot closer to the top. They're sitting way up here.
Yeah.
They're not sitting 3 meters below, you know. So the pendulum effect there's no pendulum effect in that sense. Or it's negligible with a hang glider. But with a paraglider, it's this pendulum effect, which is brilliant because you're unconscious and your hands go up a paraglider, it will want to fly straight
Yes.
and true and get you home on an XC. You probably could fly your XSC. That'd be great. So I suppose we could talk about pitch stability with the reflex shape. So what you've probably heard of the reflex airfoil shape. It's not relevant at all for free flight, but it is for paramotors. They use it quite a bit. And what the reflex is you have a wing, just like a wing's we
Is
fly.
that the back of the wing too?
Yes, it is. Now, keep in mind that really you can create reflex shapes with rigid wings. You can create defined reflex shapes with hang gliders because they're kind of semi-rigid and they've got all kind of wires and patterns. You can't force the back of a wing on a paraglider. It's a piece of material with a bit of wind in it.
Not unless it gets some buttons in.
Correct. And then it becomes less and less of a paraglider and more of a hang glider. So it's called a reflex shape, but it's kind of, it isn't really in a paraglider. But what they do is you have these what's called trimmers on your back lines. And they're mechanism where you can make the line longer or shorter. So if you make it shorter, you pull the back down and you get it nice and taut. So if you have the trimmers on a reflex wing, you pretty much have the normal airfoil shape. Because you shorten the lines and you kind of pull the wing back into the shape. If you let the trimmers off, you loosen them, what you do is this. Basically, you loosen the back. So what happens? The back of your wing kind of just flutters around and does nothing. Now, it doesn't create a reflex shape. It flutters around the place, right? You're simulating a reflex shape, but it's not really a reflex shape. It's a rigid shape where, you know, you actually have this nice little curl up.
Yes.
You know? What you get on a paraglider is you get a floppy bit of material at the back that isn't doing anything. If you look down on the paraglider from the top, when you take the trimmers off, effectively the last bit of your wing just becomes a floppy bit of material. And your wing, if you notice, has got effectively quite a bit smaller. You've gone from maybe a standard size wing down into sort of a mini wing. And what it does is, one of the things it does is it changes the angle of attack because you've let this up a bit. So now the wing kind of points a little bit like that. It moves the point of pressure forward. It loads the front of the wing. So now all the weight that used to be on all of this wing is now on a much smaller piece. So there's much more pressure in that wing, much more loading on it. It feels really steady and stable above your head. It lets you go faster. But if it goes, it's going to go big. It's going to go big because literally you have gone from possibly an E and B, which is this wing here, to an uncertified wing, which the trimmers on it. In fact, I don't think there's any reflex wing that's certified with the trimmers off. I don't think there is. I think you effectively have changed the characteristics of your wing. But the advantages it gives you is a much more stable profile. And you go faster because you get a smaller wing and your angle of attack is decreased. So that's why they use it on paramotors, because paramotors have a great big motor on your back, the kind of, you're normally in a paraglider, you're flying along here and then wings above your head. With paramotor, you're kind of flying always up a hill a bit.
Yes.
And you want the wing to come forward a little bit and have more penetration, not to be always with this high angle up there. You want it to. So you find reflex wings are used a lot with paramotors. But what isn't really advertised is that you're going from possibly a nice E and B certified wing. You put the trimmers off, you go to an uncertified wing. It has advantages, but it has disadvantages. So that's reflex. So let's talk about wash in and wash out. And wash in is more what we're interested in with party. Do you want to take a break? Or will I keep going?
We're halfway.
Yeah, we're about halfway. Let me see. What do we? Give me another 2 or 3 slides and then we'll be halfway. 20 slides will be halfway.
Yeah,
2
we're
more
at
slides.
8 o'clock.
Okay.
Sorry.
I want to go a bit
Yeah,
faster, will I? Okay. So wash in. Think of this top slide here. This is the center of the wing, the big one. And this is looking at the wing from the side, and this is the edge of the tip of the wing. So wash in is where your tip of the wing has a higher angle of attack. It's designed into the wing. So what you find is if you look at your wing as you're moving out towards the tip, it might start like that, and it slowly starts having an angle of attack that's higher. So at the front, it might go like that, and then out of the wing, it's higher. That's called wash in,
Yes.
right? And that has various characteristics associated with it.
And that's what we've got.
You'll find that paragliders have wash in because it suits a paraglider. Washout is the opposite, where the tip actually has a lower angle of attack. And that has other benefits, advantages and disadvantages. It doesn't really apply to us, and we're not going to go into it I don't think we need to go into it in this thing. So if you take a paraglider has wash in. If you look at your paraglider, above your head, it'll have a certain angle of attack, but the tips, it goes out of this, but then the tips have much more angle of attack than the center of your wing. Now, that has 2 advantages and 1 disadvantage, which is really an advantage. One of them is because the tips, when you're flying your normal flight, because the tips have a higher angle of attack, they're generating more lift.
Yes.
And therefore, they're generally trying to lift themselves out. So it keeps the pressure, span-wise pressure in the wing. It kind of keeps the 2 wingtips from spreading themselves out. So wash in generates.
So there's more lift. There's more lift created
Yeah.
as a result.
Yeah. Because
The tips.
as generally your wing isn't trimmed so that you get maximum lift at trim. There's usually a little bit, as you increase your angle of attack, you get a little bit more lift,
Yes.
but you might get more drag with it, but you get a little bit more lift.
Yes.
So what you have is because there's a higher angle of attack at the tips, they're generating a little bit more lift
Yes.
than the center part of the wing.
Yes.
And because the paraglider is a circle, that lift is pointing out in that direction. So in other words, it kind of
Yes.
just nudging the wings out a little bit more.
Yeah.
So it gives you a nice stable arc. So wash in is an advantage for a paraglider for that reason.
Yes. It's
Right.
a stable arc.
Yeah, it kind of wants the wing to thing.
Yes.
The disadvantage is if you go to a higher angle of attack, you'll keep in mind that your wingtips are even more, they will tend to stall first. So as you go up to your stall point, your wings are the things that are going to stall first, and then the center. Now that's a good thing in a paraglider as well, because you want the center to stay flying, because the wing tips can give you a little signal going, oh, you're getting close to the stall point, maybe you should stop, let the brakes off, and start flying again. So that's one of the characteristics
That's
of the
why
washing.
when I've seen people doing it,
Yeah.
you get that kind of arc in the air
Yeah.
as they're falling.
Yeah.
Because the top is still
Kind of. Well, no, at that point when they're falling, they're completely stalled. The whole wing is stalled.
right.
This is when you're approaching stall point. What you'll find is if you approach it slowly, your wingtips will start to get fluttery. And if you look at them, they'll be kind of fluttering around a bit. But the center of your wing is still flying,
Right.
barely, but still flying. That's because there's just a little bit more angle of attack in the wingtips. And that's the kind of thing that you'll start to learn to judge and to feel, and you go, oh, well, okay, I'm a bit close to my stall point. Let the brakes off. It's just
Tell me why. When you are very near a stall, your wing spins because one wing tip will go before the other.
Right.
And that will translate into a spin very, very quickly.
And the higher performance wings will react quicker and they're going to spin even quicker.
But
Right.
you've got another ion, haven't you?
No, well, U-turn.
A U-turn, that isn't it? Yeah. Particularly with the ions,
No.
you might see this with the U-turn as well. But you can see in the first third of the wing, there's a band, quite a noticeable band that goes across the first third of Steve's wing. And that is a band that takes advantage of that spanwise tension from the wingtips having a higher angle of attack.
And it's kind of stretches the wing out a bit. All right, I'll just go through the stability. There's only 2 more slides. One is yaw stability. We've been through it already. Why does the sweepback provide yaw stability? It's because paragliders and hang gliders generally have this shape. Paraglider is not as obvious unless you look down on it, but a hang glider is obvious. And the reason is if you yaw, you present more surface to the oncoming wind, it creates more drag and it forces that side back. Less drag here, so it's not forced back as much. So basically it tends to go back into the shape you want it to be in, and that's giving you stability. And then you got roll stability. I don't think we need to talk about dihedral and anhedral. So, okay. We're going to talk about drag now. And there's 2 types of drags we're interested in. Induced drag, which has very interesting definition there. Drag caused by the generation of lift. And parasitic drag, which is everything else. So, induced drag, this is where we have our wingtip vortices and stuff like that. So what happens when you're flying through the air, we went through it before with the airfoil, that there is a high pressure underneath and a low pressure above the wing. So what happens when the air from the underneath and the air from the top meet? Well, obviously there's a high pressure underneath the wing. So once the high pressure air at the back gets to the back of the wing, it's going to want to shoot up over the top of the wing because it's high pressure underneath and low pressure above. So what's going to happen is as you flow through the air goes to the back of the wing and then it goes phew, and release, and it shoots up like this. Because you move through the air at the same time, it ends up creating these curves. And that's happening all the way along your trailing edge. But where it's really noticeable is here on the tips. And because you have more than just one edge coming together, you've got a front and a back and a side and everything. And this is the biggest part of your induced drag, is the drag caused by the tips of your glider. Right? And literally it creates a vortex like that. And it flows off behind your glider on both sides.
And that's why your large aspect ratio wings perform better.
Yeah. Partly because they have a shorter chord, and because they're longer, apparently it reduces this.
Yes.
So, and that's your induced drag. Your induced drag is these vortices. So it's the big vortices at your wingtips and the little vortices that are at the back of your wing. That's your induced drag in paraglider. As you move through the air, the fact that you're creating lift because you're creating this pressure differential between what's underneath your wing and above your wing. So when the air does clear your wing, it's going to naturally want to just mix up again like this into these vortices. That's your induced lift. It's highest when you're slow, and as you go faster, it reduces. And if you could go infinitely fast, it would reduce to 0. But you can't go infinitely fast. But if you could keep speeding up, your induced drag would eventually get to 0 at infinity. There's an example of some induced drag. That's pretty big. You wouldn't want to be caught in the back there.
It's not such a big aircraft.
And it's not a big aircraft. No, it's induced drag is created, definitely size makes a difference, weight makes a difference, It's higher when you're slow. So like a jumbo jet taking off will have huge induced drag. Whereas tiny little aeroplane flying up at 3,000 feet at whatever, Mach 2 or 3 will have very little induced drag.
It goes up with wing loading.
Wing loading, right. So which is why tandem wings, if you get flying behind a tandem wing, you can get quite a bit of turbulence. You get bumped around a bit. So if there's a tandem floating around the sky, give it a little bit more space when you're flying behind it, because it's creating much bigger.
Is there more turbulence behind the wing tips as opposed to directly behind them?
Yeah, the biggest bit of turbulence is here on the tips.
So if somebody's in front of me, as it were, put them there, and I'm here, I'm going to experience more turbulence here than I am if I'm directly behind them.
You will. But keep in mind, if you're directly behind them, you're probably directly behind their body, which is creating turbulence as well. You know, so it probably isn't that significantly different. But from the airfoil point of view, the biggest turbulence comes off the tips.
Yes.
I have a picture here later on showing you turbulence. So parasitic drag, there's 3 types of parasitic drag. So induced drag is the drag that's created by your mechanism of generating lift. In other words, it's the fact that you create a high pressure underneath your wing and a low pressure above your wing. That creates induced drag. That creates these little twirls there. But there's other forms of drag, such as what we call form drag. It's just the fact that I'm pulling this shape through the air. So if you had a big flat bar like that, it creates a lot of drag. If you try to streamline it a bit and make it a nice little sphere, well, you reduced your drag by about 50% there, just by changing it to a sphere. And if you go down to a nice teardrop, well, you reduced it by 95%, compared to this just big brute force pulling a flat bar through here. So that's form drag, and it's just your shape, which is why if you want to travel fast in speed bar, pull your hands in, you know, get a nice straight shape like this. You want to have a nice streamlined cockpit and harness and everything to reduce your form drag, the drag that your shape is causing to you. So the other one is skin friction, and it's just it's the way the air kind of sticks to the material as it goes over it, right? And as the air flows over your airfoil, it will interact with the material, the imperfections of the material, and there's all the threads and the seams and everything, and that causes the air, kind of holds onto the air, it's kind of friction. So that creates skin friction, and that can be counteracted by having much cleaner lines, the materials you use, the coatings you put on the material, etc., etc. And then finally, you have what they call interference drag. Now, this is more relevant in aeroplanes than in paragliders, but it also has an impact to us. Now, this is where you have 2 different airflows bumping into each other because of the shape. So if you take an airplane there, as that's flying through the air, it's forcing the air at the front, it's forcing the body of air to push up this side. But there's also air being pushed over from this side, and those 2 bodies of air are just going to bump into each other, create all sorts of turbulence, and turbulence generates drag. Turbulence drag. So this is called interference drag, and it's drag caused by your shape causes the air to kind of bump into each other, into itself. And interference drag is higher when you have acute angles like this. So these here are going to create more interference drag than this angle here, for instance, isn't as acute. Okay. So those are the 3 forms of parasitic drag. And the ones that, it's the biggest one we have is definitely the form drag is the biggest form of parasitic drag for us. This would be the second one, skin friction with the aerofoil. So how do they work? Because parasitic drag increases as you go faster. Induced drag decreases as you go faster. So it makes sense there's going to be a sweet point somewhere. And if you graph them, so your parasitic drag is, you have no parasitic drag when you're not moving through the air. As you move through the air and get faster and faster and faster, it just gets more and more and more and more and more. And this is one of the reasons why you have the maximum speed. Because it just gets more and more and more and more and more. eventually you can't go any faster
Yes.
because your drag, look, it's not even a straight line, it's logarithmic, it's heading up there. Your induced drag has the opposite effect. It starts really high. So when you're traveling through the air very slowly, you create great big vortices. So you have a lot of induced drag when you're moving slowly.
So I said it's your greatest induced drag.
It's
So
when you're
taking
slow.
off.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
On your runway, as it
Yes.
were.
Yeah. Yeah.
On your
Correct.
runway.
Yeah. Correct. But as you get faster and faster and faster, it decreases. And there will be a point where both these graphs, your total drag obviously is you add your parasitic drag and your induced drag, add them together and you get a number. So that's my total drag.
Yes.
So it's holding me back.
Yes.
And your minimum drag is only at the point where these two graphs meet, right? And that is going to correspond. There's your total drag. You can add them together, right? Add that number and that number together, you get to that. Right? So your total drag will have this shape with a big extended U. And at this point here, at the lowest point, that's where you have the least amount of drag. And strangely enough, that corresponds with your best glide. Best glide. Best glide means best glide angle.
Yes.
So whatever speed that is for your paraglider, and of course these changes with the air. But if you're in still air, there will be a speed that you fly that gives you the best glide
Yes.
in still air.
Yes.
In other words, you will fly the furthest.
Yes.
And it's no surprise that it coincides with the point that you're least glide. It's the speed that you're least glide. Okay. That's what your best glide is. It's the point that you have least total drag.
Yes.
Make sense?
Yes.
So let's talk about airspeed versus ground speed. Any questions on drag?
Yes. What happens at the lowest sink rate?
We'll go into that later. I've got that. So we will, yeah, we'll talk about that later because I'll show the polar curve and we can talk about it then. But any questions about drag itself? Okay. Right, so let's talk about airspeed versus ground speed. So ground speed, we know what ground speed is. Ground speed is what we generally think of as speed. It's how fast we're moving over the ground. And if you're driving a car, I'm driving at 60 miles an hour, that's my ground speed. I'm driving over the ground, I'm moving over the ground at 60 miles an hour. Now, in still air, in other words, the air isn't moving at all. So we're flying in this body of air here and it's completely still. If we're moving at 10 kilometers an hour over the ground, well, we're also moving through the air at 10 kilometers an hour. Now, when they talk about airspeed, what they mean is how fast is the air flowing over my wing, which is opposite to the direction you're traveling. So if I'm traveling in that direction, actually, I've got my arrow wrong. My airspeed is actually, it's the wing going over, it's the air coming into my face.
Yeah.
Airspeed is how fast is the air flowing over your wing.
Yes.
So if I'm moving in that direction, the air is moving over my wing in this direction. In still air, if I'm moving over the ground at 10 kilometers an hour, in other words, my ground speed is 10 kilometers an hour, my airspeed is 10 kilometers an hour. Still air.
But you're descending, so your actual distance you're moving is.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Is further.
No,
So, yes.
that has nothing to do with, it doesn't matter if I'm going up, I'm going down, I'm going sideways. How fast is the air flowing over my wing?
Yeah.
That's my airspeed. And in still air, it's exactly the same as my ground speed. So, what happens if we've got a tailwind? Right? So effectively, we're flying in a big body of air that's moving along over the ground at 5 kilometers an hour. Right? We would still be moving through this body of air at 10 kilometers an hour. We're moving along there, 10 kilometers an hour. But from somebody standing on the ground, we're now moving over the ground at 10 kilometers an hour, plus the fact that this whole body of air is moving forward at 5. We're moving over the ground at 15 kilometers an hour. So our ground speed is our airspeed plus the wind. And if it's a tailwind, it's actually moving us faster. So do you understand the difference between ground speed and airspeed?
Yes.
Right. And similarly, if you have a headwind, Well, it just slows your ground speed. Your airspeed remains the same. I'm still flowing through this mass of air here at 10 kilometers an hour. But this whole body of air is moving this way at 5 kilometers an hour. So my ground speed is not on 5. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the difference between airspeed and ground speed. And it's important. It becomes really important when you're coming into land. The reason is you need airspeed to fly. You need the air flowing over your wing to generate lift. You don't need ground speed to fly. You need airspeed, right? You don't need ground speed. For instance, you could be in a wind tunnel, completely stationary, but because they're blowing air over your wing, you may be flying in that wind tunnel, but you have 0 ground speed. So you don't need any ground speed to fly. You need airspeed, and that's important. That can become quite important when you're coming into land, and you may be coming into land into a headwind, or for instance, a tailwind, and you're coming into land, and as you're coming into the ground, you seem to be getting faster and faster and faster over the ground. And you start slowing down. Because I don't want to go so fast over the ground. But then you get so slow that you're not actually flying through the air at all. You've killed your airspeed. You stop and you fall out of the air, you hurt yourself. So this is the important speed for paragliding airspeed. You have to keep the air flowing over your wing. You need airspeed to fly. You don't need ground speed to fly. Now they're usually quite related. But you need airspeed, not ground speed. Right. So, any questions about airspeed and ground speed? The difference between airspeed and ground speed? Okay. So let's talk about the polar curve. You'll definitely be asked a couple of questions, at least one on the polar curve. So you need to study it because it's not obvious. It's one of these things, it's a graph, you just have to learn to use it. So what a polar curve is you create your 2 axes. This is your sink rate or your lift rate. So if I'm sinking, come down here, lift rate. And this is your airspeed, left or right. So if I'm going faster, I'm moving up this graph, and I'm slower, moving up this graph. And then what you do is you go into perfectly still air and you fly at different speeds and you graph your sink. Right? So somebody's gone out one day with lots of equipment on their deck and they've flown around in a beautiful still morning. And they've gone slower, and they check, okay, how much am I sinking now? Oh, I'm sinking that much, I'm sinking 2 meters a second. Okay, there's my, if I go at that speed, I sink at 2 meters per second. If I go at this speed, I sink at 1.5 meters per second. If I go at this speed, I sink at this. And you end up getting a graph that generally always looks like this, always. Right? It has a drop-off point here where you stall. So point in graphing down here because you're stalling over the air, so you're stalling over the air. And generally it looks like that. Some wings, it'll be more pronounced, some wings might be a little bit flatter, but they always look like this. Okay. And this graph can tell you some things. So that's your stall point. It's always there. It's always the end of the graph. You can't graph beyond this because you've stalled.
Like you've got a straight line down.
Correct. That is your stall point. So the very tip of your graph here is your min sink. Because literally that is what it is. If you work it over onto your sink axis, it's the point on your graph, on your line, that you have the minimum sink. That's your min sink point. So whatever speed that was, that's your min sink for your wing. And that's the speed. If you fly at that speed, you have the minimum sink. And then the one that you're probably more interested in is your best glide, which is what gives me the furthest distance that I could possibly go. What's my best glide? And the way you get your best glide in still air is you draw a line from this point here. You draw a tangent to your curve, and just where it touches your curve, that's your best glide. I work that up there and you go, that's the speed I need to fly at to be at my best glide. And generally, that is the pattern you see. You find your stall is on the left, your min sink is in the middle, and your best glide is a little bit to the right. I believe modern wings, these 2 points are getting closer. Older wings, they were wider apart. It's just design and stuff like that. But but generally that's the pattern you get to. Stall, mid sink. Okay, so you can use this polar curve then to work out. This is the one you're really interested in using. My best glide. I want to find what's my best glide. It's my best glide in still air. And you could go up there and this could say, let's say 36 kilometers an hour. I go, fine. In still air, I'm going to fly 36 kilometers an hour because that can give me the best glide. I can get the furthest. What if there's a tailwind or a headwind, or you're in sink or lift? What do you do then? Do you still fly at 36 kilometers an hour? Well, let's talk about headwind and tailwind. So, just showing you, this is the same graph. This is what my best glide was in still air. So you take a tangent from the point there, and you just draw it so that it just touches your curve. The pointer just touches the curve. Come up to here, and that gives you the speed for your best glide. Let's say you have a tailwind. Now, if you have a tailwind, this is your airspeed. What's going to happen to your airspeed if you have a tailwind? You're going to go faster. There's wind pushing you. The way you work this polar curve with the tailwind is you start the point of your line further to the left. So let's say you had a tailwind of, I don't know, I'd say these are 10s. So let's say you had a tailwind of 20 kilometers an hour. You actually draw your line to your curve from the minus 20 point. This is what you just have to learn.
Yes.
If you have a tailwind, you move to the left. And you start your point from there and you draw again a tangent to where you just touch your curve, what you will find is in a tailwind, your best glide is a little bit slower. Because it'll be to the left of where it was in still air. So what's that telling you? If you've got a tailwind and you want to maximize your glide, slow down a little. Not a lot. Don't slow down so that you get to the stall. But a little. If you slow down a little with a tailwind, you maximize your glide. That's what this is showing you. Okay.
So is that what you guys are doing if say if you're on the ridge and it's slightly to one side, there's the ridge, and then on the glider and the wind's coming from there. When you're flying, are you flying faster? As it were, slightly into wind.
Generally into wind, I'll be on bar. But I don't really slow down when I've got a tailwind. I can just fly around. Might be on bar because I just want to go somewhere else. But
so if it's just slightly off, if it's
it has a bigger impact on
wind. You will tend to put your speed bar on.
It's more significant with a headwind.
Yes.
To fly faster than with a tailwind. Look, there isn't really a lot of difference.
Yeah. Obviously, on the hill, you won't be flying in.
Let's talk about a headwind.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. I've now gone to a 20 kilometer an hour headwind.
Yes.
I've done the same thing. I've started from my point there. I've drawn a tangent to the curve. Where it touches the curve, I've raised an arrow. That's my best glide with a headwind. In other words, wind in my face.
Yeah.
In other words, it's telling me you got to speed up. And you will generally find this pattern where there's a more significant benefit to flying faster in a headwind than there is to flying slower in a tailwind. Because a tailwind, there isn't much difference really between the speeds, your best glide speed. But look at the difference there. Your best glide is way out here. In other words, it's telling you, if you got wind in your face, get on the speed bar. That's what this is telling you. And this, if you've drawn this curve precisely, which generally you can't get it precise, but if you could, this would not only tell you to go faster, but tell you what speed you should fly at. Or for a 20 kilometer an hour headwind, you should fly at whatever that is, 30, 40, 45 kilometers an hour. For a 20 kilometer an hour tailwind, you should be flying at 34 kilometers to maximize your glide. It's a similar thing for if you're in lift and in sink. If you're in sinking air, move up the graph and start your point. And if you're in rising air, move down the graph and start your point. And what you're going to find is if you're in sink, speed up. If you're in lift, slow down. If you've got a headwind, speed up. If you've got a tailwind, slow down. but significantly, it's with the headwind and the sink. That's where you get the biggest benefit of getting your speed right.
Yes.
If you got a headwind or you're in sync, get on the bar because you get a much bigger increase in your best line,
Yes.
more significant benefit.
But quite often it's just full bar.
Yeah, give it all you have.
We don't speed up a lot, do we? Not like we go
Mhm.
from 20 miles an hour to 100.
Yep, and I'll show you later on, I'll show you an example of how that actually works. So this is just putting all of these three graphs together. Your best glide in headwind or sinking gear is faster than your normal speed.
Yes.
And your best glide in the tailwind or rising gear is a little bit slower, but if you don't go slower, it's not going to make a significant difference. But this will.
You don't ever get a question where it's like, you're in sinking air and you got a headwind.
Yep.
Actually do that more.
I'll show you.
To create a box.
What about this one here? So question, best glide, still air. How do you get your best glide speed in still air?
From the cross point.
From the north.
The north,
Across
yeah.
is-
Exactly, and just draw a tangent and you go there and it says boom, 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 right. And it's roughly 35 kilometers an hour in this chart. Okay. Next one. Headwind of 20 kilometers an hour.
It's a
So
headwind.
you go from the 20
You go
to the right there.
yeah, you go to 20.
Think of it as if imagine you're facing that way, a headwind is coming from here. So you move towards your headwind. You'll have to find your own mnemonic, what it is to decide, do I move left or right or up or down?
Are your digits right on the y-axis?
It doesn't matter.
Hey, it's just numbers.
It's just numbers to explain a concept. Yeah. So so headwind, you find your best glide is faster. Now you're up at about 45. Before we're at 35, now we're at 45. Right, so aha! For you,
Yeah, no, exactly.
what are you going to do? Where are you going to start your line, your tangent line? You got a headwind, so you want to come out this axis.
Yes.
But you're in sync, so you also want to go up.
Yeah.
So you go, I got a headwind of 20, I got sync at 2, where did it join? That's my start point.
Yeah.
There you go. And it finds that it's quite fast. It's 3 kilometers an hour. You probably, with your wings, you probably won't be able to reach that near. Feet might. And mine might. Yeah. So you just, these are the same.
You might add some ballast.
Ballast, yeah. Yeah. So you just have to learn how to use a polar curve. You're not going to learn it here in this presentation. It's just give you an idea.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to figure out. I find I can never remember should I go left or right or up. Right. Okay. So polar curve. Right. One last thing. What happens when you add weight? What happens when you ballast up?
You go faster.
Yes, you do. Well, what happens to your polar curve? Effectively, what happens with your polar curve is you move it down this direction, down and to the right. So if you put some weight on, this is what happens. Your curve moves down. It's generally the same curve.
Right,
It just
okay.
moves down.
Yeah, okay.
And then if you work out your 3 points again, they've all moved to the right.
Yes.
Your stall point is higher,
Yes.
but also your min sync and your best line are all higher.
Yes.
Everything just moves slow.
Yes.
That's pretty much it. And you're also sinking a bit more, you can see, kind of lower on the sink rate thing.
But your glide angle is still the same.
Your glide angle is pretty much the same, and you can think of it as your graph kind of just moves down this line.
Yes.
The one you're going to be asked is this. What happens when you put weight? What happens to your stall speed when you put weight in the glider? It
It
increases.
increases.
Okay? No weight, weight, no weight, weight.
Yes.
All right, so that's just something you need to be careful if you ballast up. You can't fly as slowly as you might be used to. Okay, right. Let's talk about a couple of examples. This is Nil Wind. So here we are. I'm at 1,000 meters, a kilometer up, still air, no thermals, absolutely nothing. I'm on my final glide, coming in 6 o'clock in the evening. I'm at a brilliant XC, come over the Humber. I have a straight glide to home. If I go at min sync, interestingly enough, that won't get me further than my trim speed. Now, why am I saying that? Is that correct? I think that trim speed should be best
Trim
glide.
speed is best.
My best glide, my trim speed is best glide. This is best glide, isn't it?
Yes.
Right, min sync is, if you look at these numbers here, min sync is where you have the lowest vertical sync rate. So on my min sync, which on this hypothetical glider at 32 kilometers an hour, which is, you know, let's say my trim speed is 38, I've got a bit of brake on. I'm only sinking at 1.05 meters a second. That's my minimum sync of those three. But because I'm not moving forward as fast as on the other two, I don't actually, by the time I hit the ground, I don't actually get the furthest. Although I have the min sync, I don't get the best glide. Whereas this trim speed, which happens to be close to my best glide, trim speed, I have a little bit more sync, but I'm traveling horizontally over the ground a little bit faster, almost 2 meters a second faster. I've made these numbers up to make this look right, but this is generally the pattern of the
On
glider.
the paraglide, it's trim speed, just your hands.
Yep.
No brakes.
That's what it's trimmed at. Yeah. And modern paragliders, trim speed and best glider are pretty much the same.
Yes.
On older paragliders, they weren't,
Yes.
but on modern gliders, generally, they recommended just be flying around hands up for best glide. If I put on speed bar, although speed bar gives me a much faster horizontal distance, I'm moving over the ground much faster. I've also increased my sync rate quite a bit. And by the way, these points do work out here, exactly for these. So what happens is if I go from a kilometer up with speed bar, I actually don't quite get as far as if I was at min sync or at trim speed. Trim speed gets me 9 kilometers. Speed bar gets me 7.4. So I'd actually go an extra kilometer just by keeping my hands up and still out. Right. So this dotted line here is my trim speed at Nil Wind. Think of trim speed as my best slide.
Yes.
Right. So I've now got a tailwind, I've got wind behind me.
Yes.
Things are a little bit different. Speed bar still is the shortest of the two by a good bit. My trim speed and my min sync now are pretty much the same. Yep. Yeah. And if you go the other way, I've got a headwind of 20 kilometers an hour, roughly. 20.5, I must have been very precise. I remember working all these numbers out to get this pattern here. So what you have in a headwind, again, 1,000 meters, I've got a headwind, and these are the numbers of my wing. If I stick on speed bar, I will get the furthest. Not by a huge amount, only a little bit.
Yes.
There's less of a difference there generally, the headwind, than that. In my numbers, it's 4 kilometers. Now, of course, these are fictitious numbers that I made up. Whereas there isn't a huge separation here. But the reason is anyway, you've less space. You've less space to actually differentiate here. So you have to. Here you've gone further, so your exaggerations or your distances are stretched out. The further you go, the bigger difference there will be in how far apart these lines are as well. So, what do you do? Take away from that. If you got a headwind or if you're in sync, get on that. If you got a tailwind or you're rising in rising air, slow down a little. Not too much, a little. Right, that's pretty much what I think we need to take out of that. And then your 3 different types of variometers, you might be asked for them. So you have a basic vario, which just tells you, am I going up or down in the air? It doesn't tell you anything about the air mass you're flowing in. Right, then you have a total energy vario. Now that's a little bit different. That tells you it makes a calculation not only of whether you're going up or down, but also your forward movement. Now that becomes relevant, for instance, if I'm flying along like this and I hit some rising air, I'd like to, and obviously I start rising, well, that's a good thing. I could lift. If, on the other hand, I'm doing something like this, I'm pulling my brake and I'm starting to do pendulum, right? As I'm penduluming forward, I'm rising, but I'm not really gaining anything there, right? So a basic vario in both instances will tell me, oh, you're going up, good thing,
Yes, it is.
right? Whereas a total energy vario will be able to tell the difference,
Yeah.
because it'll notice with my pendulum effect that when I've increased my speed,
Yes.
and although I am rising, I've also increased my speed, and therefore say, well, actually, you're not really getting the net gain at all,
Yes.
you know, or maybe you decrease your speed. I can't remember. But anyway, it'll tell you the difference between those two scenarios. The variables
Place
usually
you get
don't.
this.
Hmm?
The place you get this in a paraglider, it always happens, is if you come off of speed bar because you heard a blip. So you just got a little blip and you thought, oh, there's going to be some rising air around here. You come off speed bar, and funnily enough, that beeping continues.
Yeah, because the wind drops back.
You just come off speed bar, you've slowed down, that's converted to extra height.
Yeah. So you think sorted.
yeah,
I think something.
I'm
And
in
it's
a
just
massive
it's a
climb.
big. It's big. The varios we fly are of this type. Generally. I don't think the total energy varios.
So you can start to put in total energy with a newer style of paragliding varios, because you've got the 3 or the 6 axis inertial measurements.
All right. Okay, I didn't know that.
Like your phone's got.
Okay.
So yes, you can do that. There's not a great tradition of doing that, because we just
You just
we
know.
don't have the speed range to in a sailplane. Yeah, it was a big technical thing that needed to be sorted, but in a paraglider, it's just less of an issue. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, the only time you properly get it is you come off a speed bar because you heard a blip.
Yeah. And you get caught up by that once, twice, and then you know.
And then you know.
Then you know. Yeah. So then the third type of vario, again, is nothing to do with us. It's what's called an near mass vario. So that will tell you also about the vertical movement of the air you're in. So it's the whole body of air, I mean, moving up or down.
Yes.
And that is it.